All right. Well, welcome everyone to NEBRA's 21st quarterly Northeast Digestion Roundtable meeting. Our guest today is Dr. Jeffrey McCutcheon. He's a professor at the Department of Chemical and Biomolecular Engineering at the University of Connecticut. He's also the director of the Connecticut Center for Applied Separation Technology. You can see the CAST logo there on his screen. Jeff has a BS in chemical engineering from the University of Dayton and his PhD in chemical engineering from Yale University. And for nearly 20 years, he's pioneered work in membrane-based separation technologies. He's raised over $10 million to support research in the areas of forward osmosis, membrane distillation, nanofiltration, reverse osmosis, pervaporation, vapor permeation, organic solvent, nanofiltration, and additive manufacturing for membranes. He's published over 90 refereed publications, written 3 book chapters, and has several patents on membrane technology. He's a leader and he's received numerous awards during his career. We could spend 15 minutes introducing him here, but his accomplishments are too numerous for me to list off. But in 2021, Jeff was inducted into the Connecticut Academy of Science and Engineering. Congratulations on that, Jeff. And Jeff is actually working with NEBRA and his Uconn collaborators on an exciting project in the world of anaerobic digestion, which has the potential to take AD to the next level. And we've invited Jeff to share this exciting research with you today. If you've joined us in the past, you know these meetings are pretty informal, but to keep things orderly, I'm asking that you put your computers on mute during the presentation, and feel free to use the chat function or the Q&A to ask questions. And then when we open it up for questions, I just ask that you use the raise hand feature, which is in the reactions tab down at the bottom. Just keep things a little more orderly. And with that, I am very happy to introduce you to Professor McCutcheon from Uconn. Jeff, take it away.
Thank you very much for the kind introduction, Janine. It's great to be here. Thanks to NEBRA for hosting this event and for all of you for attending. I look forward to having a very casual conversation with you about what we're doing on this project and hopefully to get some interesting feedback from the community who may not be familiar with what we're doing. So I come to you from a chemical engineering background, which in this community is, I think, sometimes seen, but I think a lot of environmental engineers do sort of inhabit this community of anaerobic digestion. And I was trained as an environmental engineer at Yale when I was working with many Anaerobic, but mostly in areas of membrane separations, water treatment, desalination. And so this project and my work with NEBRA is actually a very new area for me. I don't have a lot of background in anaerobic digestion, but I understand the ins and outs to understand how it might sit into a larger system. Something else I'm doing as well, along with some of my other activities at Uconn, is I'm a deputy topic area lead at the National Alliance for Water Innovation, which is the Department of Energy's $100 million hub dedicated to improving water technology across the United States, particularly to assist with distributed water treatment systems, resource recovery from wastewater treatment systems, and just generally reducing the energy consumption costs and greenhouse gas emissions and life cycle impacts of water treatment systems across the United States. And so this particular program, which funds this work, is closely collaborating with NAWI, we call that NAWI as the acronym, to better understand where the Department of Energy can help to support water treatment technology development and to make an impact on some of those life cycle impacts, like, for instance, greenhouse gas emissions. So this work that I'm talking about is a collaboration between the University of Connecticut, the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District, and NEBRA. It is funded under Department of Energy's funding opportunity announcement 2336, which is the Research and Development for Advanced Water Resource Recovery Systems announcement that was released back in 2020. We received an award in this. It's a $40 million program. I think $27 million has been distributed amongst about a dozen or so awardees, and it has supported a wide variety of resource recovery research efforts in the space of areas like wastewater treatment and anaerobic digestion. We are one of several anaerobic digestion projects that are being funded. And our area is in understanding how we might be able to improve anaerobic digestion using modern digitalization, automation, and optimization techniques to improve the value proposition of AD, particularly in co-digestion applications. Before diving into the meat of the proposed work itself, I come to you from the Connecticut Center for Applied Separations Technology, which is my laboratory at the University of Connecticut, located in the Innovation Partnerships Building, which is a recently built facility to serve as an interface to the industrial community with Uconn. And we offer a variety of services, contract R&D, testing services for membrane separations across all separations areas, not just water treatment and desalination, but also in non-aqueous liquids, gas separations, and vapor separations. So we have a good team of people that work in our lab, including graduate students and permanent staff, which support a number of federally funded industrial projects, including this one. So our team on this project includes 5 Uconn faculty members, myself, Dr. Baik-Kun Lee from environmental engineering, Dr. George Ballas from chemical engineering, Dr. Ranjan Srivastava, and Dr. Matt Stuber, also from chemical engineering. Ned Beecher is our co-PI from NEBRA, and Sherry Cousins from the Greater Lawrence Sanitary District as our municipal partner for this project. And so this team, each person plays a unique role, and I'll be talking a little bit about each of those roles today in this project. So the challenge of anaerobic digestion is really focused on operability and resiliency. If we think about where we have challenges in anaerobic digestion today, it is that they're biological systems that can be notoriously fickle, especially when operators may not know all the ins and outs of how they work, whether it's something unique about the biology in the system, or a process control, or a sensor system that may not be functioning properly. They're a little bit delicate to handle and operate, especially when you have variable feedstocks. And in co-digestion operations, where you might have biosolids from municipal plants versus food waste, which can vary in quality greatly, this risks sort of unbalancing anaerobic digestion and causing some pretty catastrophic failures of these systems, which are hard to recover from. And so our hope is to identify approaches for monitoring and optimizing operations to maximize the stability and the opportunities for resource recovery using digestion. And this might avoid challenges associated with things like overloading of feedstocks, or fluctuation of composition of feedstocks, or variability by season, or microbial issues that may be present inside these digesters. And these issues need to be addressed not only at the large scale, such as the Deer Island and plant in Boston, but also at smaller scales and distributed scales, such as the private digester in Southington, Connecticut, where Quantum Biopower runs a food waste digester. Because if we think about digestion for biosolids, one of the challenges that we face, especially in more rural areas, is centralized facilities just don't exist, and so more distributed digestion options need to be considered to manage biosolids, to manage food wastes. Unfortunately, those smaller systems are actually more prone to these operational challenges because they lack sort of this large, immovable microbial community that is more difficult to create some kind of collapse. So if you're going to be considering a more distributed option for digestion, you need to have better control systems, better monitoring systems to avoid those crashes, what we refer to as a meltdown. Likewise, identifying ways to improve performance of the digester to to create clear economic incentives for operation. What's interesting about the Quantum Biopower food waste digester is it's a privately run digester, one of the first in the country. And that's because they've created an economic model around its operation that makes sense financially. So if that's the case, if a private digester can operate, public digesters should also be able to operate with excellent financial incentives. So we want to maximize that financial impact by optimizing the digester to operate in such a way that maximizes potentially this financial metric of performance. At the same time, other metrics might be of interest, such as reduced life cycle greenhouse gas emissions. And we want to be able to assess how a digester can change its operation through potentially using a machine learning algorithm to achieve those metrics of success. So I'm hoping to actually garner from this group today your thoughts on digester operations. What is valuable from a digester? Is it the VFAs? Is it the biogas? Is it the reduced volume of the biosolids? Is it just the tipping fees? Like, where is that value? I'm hoping to maybe get some feedback from the community today. So in our project, we've identified a research question of can we better control anaerobic digesters to prevent failure and harness better economic and life cycle benefits? Can we control digesters to do these things? The hypothesis being that by using a machine learning algorithm to aid in our control strategy, we can improve co-digester performance across a number of metrics. And the MLA avoids this human heuristic interaction, which can be difficult to maintain consistency. And also, since every digester is different in terms of what its feedstock is and what its output operation goals are, what its regulatory goals are, sometimes the human interface isn't fast enough or able to maybe make good guesses as to how the digester should operate. Our objective then is to enable this machine learning algorithm by using what we call a novel milli-electrode array platform to capture high fidelity data within an operating digester. And we can use this high fidelity spatial data, both radially inside the digester and from a depth profile perspective, to train a machine learning algorithm to provide predictive adjustments in digester operation. And we can use this MLA and demonstrate its performance, not on a real digester, but what we call a digital twin, which will enable us to simulate a digester in a computerized environment and to understand how changing various operating parameters will impact digester performance and outputs. And so a diagram of how that would work is here, where we have our digester, which will be instrumented with what we call our MEA platform. And this platform, which I'll describe in greater detail on a different slide, will be submerged into the digester at different radii and different depths. And it will be in the liquid as well as the sludge zones, although these are fairly suspended and somewhat homogeneous environments. And every digester is a little bit different in how it operates and how it mixes. Sometimes they're not impellers, sometimes they're pumps. It's all very different based on the digester design. The idea here is being able to monitor what's happening inside the digester: pH, nitrogen compounds, temperature, these different metrics that kind of can give you insight into how the digester is performing. And that will output to a machine learning algorithm to train the algorithm. And coupled with past data and existing algorithms or heuristics, we can create a control system and a control strategy to adjust various parameters of the digester. Maybe it's flow rate, maybe it's mixing rate, maybe it's temperature. Some of these different parameters can be controlled based on what the digester options are. And then we try to connect that control to output value. So maybe the value in biogas, the value in a treated water source or ammonia or VFAs, the value in the biosolids, fertilizers, minerals. We'll monitor the value of each of these different streams and then connect that back to our machine learning algorithm so that it can optimize how the digester should work for a specific output metric. So if you want to optimize for financial value, then you might have a different metric versus if you want to optimize for life cycle impacts. And so we want to identify what those specific metrics are, and I'm happy to get some feedback from this group in that as well, and then install our sensor network on an operating digester at GLSD for data collection, and then use that MLA-aided process to simulate control of a digital twin model. That will use some sort of simulation software. We'll start with ADM1 type simulations and then hopefully expand upon that. We also hope to be able to integrate that software into a rapidly developing techno-economic assessment tool being developed by the National Alliance for Water Innovation called WaterTap, that will allow us to sort of gather some of these metrics through an actual techno-economic tool. The sensor platform is a key part of our project. How do you capture data inside of a digester? Well, we have these very inexpensive milli-electrode array sensor platforms that have multiple sensors on a single chip, almost like a lab on a chip device, if you will. And we can measure things like oxidative reductive potential, pH, temperature, conductivity, ammonium. And we've demonstrated each of these different platforms, from depth profiling inside of laboratory digesters, which you see here, where you might have a deep sensor showing temperature profile versus a sensor at the top of a little lab scale digester. Likewise, we can look at pH after shocks and perturbations in the system, so that we can see how, in this particular case, there's very little difference in pH as a function of depth, but there is a difference in temperature as a function of depth. We'll be able to capture a good sense of what's happening in the digester by putting as many of these sensors in as we can safely into an operating digester. So here's a picture of our lab scale digester, allowing us to do, I would say, some pretty minor depth profiling, but we'll be building a test system to evaluate the depth profile of an ideal case system inside of our laboratory that will be probably close to 10 feet high. And we expect to be able to make a 10-foot long MEA platform to insert into these digesters. They're very inexpensive. Their resiliency is okay. I would say that their resiliency is actually quite good given their price. And we can easily replace them based on where we install them into the digester, so that we can, it's just a matter of replacing them with regularity when they begin to fail inside of these rather difficult environments. I would also be really interested to hear from the community about your interests and needs around sensor and monitoring needs inside anaerobic digester systems. We don't have a lot of sense as to where the pain points are with respect to monitoring. Most of the monitoring is in the pipes going out or the pipes going in. There might be some monitoring inside digesters, but hearing more about what different groups are doing to monitor digester performance would be good. We're very happy to work with GLSD as our partner. They operate a state-of-the-art wastewater treatment facility and digester facility in Lawrence, Massachusetts, where they have a standard, I would call it a fairly standard activated sludge primary and secondary treatment process that you would see in many type of municipal treatment systems. And then the biosolids from that process are sent to the digester and blended with food waste that comes in from a third party. After digestion, the biogas is burned on site to generate electricity and actually supplies the entire plant's energy needs, which is a really exciting thing to see. It saves the facility millions of dollars a year in electricity costs. And then the remaining solids from the digester are then dried into a soil amendment product on site by another third party, and then that gets distributed out to farmers or sold as a product to farmers. But it's a way to sort of manage the biosolids in a very sustainable approach without having to worry about trying to find a place to landfill those solids, while at the same time using the biogas for beneficial reuse on site for power generation. And so our team got to visit this facility back in the fall of 2020. 2021, excuse me. And we had a great visit to see this pretty impressive operation. What you see here in the lower right-hand corner is actually this this building here, the large building, is in the forefront of the picture is where the generators are that generate the power. They're the engines. There's also pre-treatment of the gas to remove I think sulfur dioxide and silica from that gas stream to prevent damage to the engines. And you see the 4 digesters in the background here. I believe when we were there, 3 of them were operating, and we got to actually take a close look at one of them so that we could identify locations where our sensors could be safely installed in the digester. So George Ballas, Ranjan Srivastava, and I also think Matt Stuber will be helping with this as well, is to work on this MLA controlled digital twin. This is going to be a model which takes essentially what we're going to create a model which shows the performance of the GLSD digester and allows us to make perturbations to it and to use control strategies to show how we can adjust the different outputs of the digester by changing different inputs. And we do this using a lot of machine learning algorithm tools that have been developed by others and used in other applications to potentially control biological systems. And so Ranjan Srivastava is running our MLA development, while George Ballas is helping us to build the actual digital twin in the IDEAS platform, which has been used by the Department of Energy to do process modeling in the past. If there are specific questions related to this, I'm going to probably divert you to Ranjan or George Ballas for those specific answers, but I can talk about it in somewhat generalities.
Jeff, there was a question now. Did you want to take questions as you go, or
sure, why not?
Okay, yeah,
Absolutely.
Trung, if you wanted to
Trung,
unmute and ask.
Jeffrey, this is really cool stuff. I saw in the earlier, I guess, model outline that, so are you doing the model around just the unit process of the digestion, or are you doing it around both the digesters and the dewatering system?
You mean like, so you mean like this dewatering system here, the centrifuge?
That's right.
We haven't decided the level of detail yet. I should say this project officially started in October of 2021, and so our first 6 months have been mostly are dedicated to having a deep understanding of the GLSD system and identifying which particular parts of the process we do want to model, as well as providing to the DOE what target metrics we're actually going to look at. And there's so many different metrics you can look at. So what are the ones that we're going to identify as the most important? And what's interesting is that we're getting different answers from what's important to municipalities versus what we think is important as academics. And sometimes there's this divergence of what's important. Is it going to matter for us to model dewatering? It probably will. We'd like to incorporate as many features of the system as we can, because we want to be able to capture the energy use of those processes so that we can understand the net energy benefits of the digester process. So my answer is that we will try to model as much as we can on the platform using existing models, and build models where we have to if we think that they constitute a significant energy consumption portion or a significant CapEx or OpEx feature of the process. Does that answer your question?
Yes, I'm actually working on a case study, not quite as in-depth as you guys are, on developing a machine learning model to do a cost efficiency real-time type of case study. But connecting different unit processes has been challenging, and then also development of soft sensors between the different systems has been the challenge. So I've been curious of what machine learning type of algorithms you're using and how you're reducing dimensionality and dealing with those kind of details.
Yeah, I wish my colleague Ranjan was here. I don't see his student either on the line, but this is a great question. And I know that he's considering a number of different platforms to apply to this system. And he'll probably take some of his lessons from other machine learning controlled biological systems. But I think what we have to do is first see what data is available. And we have a lot of great historical data from GLSD. There's a whole life cycle assessment on the GLSD digester and wastewater treatment plant system that we can then, he can like sort of look at to decide which MLA is going to work the best given this data set that we currently have. Because you can probably do a lot with just that data set. And then we're going to be adding an enormous amount of data in addition to this, because we could have 30, 50 sensors instrumented on the digester, capturing data as frequently as you need. But it's a good question. I wish I could answer your question more specifically.
No, that was great. Thank you. Thank you for answering my questions.
Trung, if you want to touch base offline, I'm happy to set up a meeting to hear more about what you're doing with machine learning algorithm development and control systems, and then bring in Dr. Srivastava for a discussion. Please feel free to follow up with me. I'll put my email in the chat. If anyone
Yes,
wants to,
thank you, Jeff.
contact me. So just a couple more slides here. The next step, once we do have a control strategy in place, is to actually optimize the digester's performance around specific metrics. And so Matt Stuber is our optimization specialist on our team. Robert Gottlieb, who's on the call today, is a student working on this project. And it's going to be interesting to see how we integrate the MLA into an optimization tool and framework. It'll be optimized around specific output metrics. So I'm pretty sure right now that one of our output metrics will be life cycle greenhouse gas emission reduction, because the DOE has a specific interest in this. And that's because the executive branch of the federal government has a specific interest in this. And so understanding how burning biogas for offsetting other fossil fuel for power production, biosolids management and application onto soils, potentially alternatives to incineration for biosolids. All of these sort of life cycle elements will be incorporated into our analysis. And then we hope to be able to adjust different parameters of the digester operation to optimize for that particular metric, for instance, greenhouse gas emission reduction, and to use some of these control strategies and mathematical approaches to doing so. So our project goal is we're focused primarily on small to mid-scale digesters, because those are the ones that have the most operational challenges. Though we're happy to also work with large-scale digesters, which obviously have a sort of an oversized impact on biogas generation and biosolids acquisition. But focus also on co-digestion specifically, since food wastes offer significant improvements in some of the outputs of digesters because of their organic content. Then we want to quantify the economic as well as life cycle incentives for co-digestion, and target what I would consider a minimum wastewater treatment cost reduction of about 25%. And this would be something that we put into our proposal. I think we have one data point already showing that GLSD saves a significant amount of money in electricity costs for operating its plant because of its digester. We want to demonstrate that capture of energy or other life cycle energy components of an anaerobic digester can realize net zero energy wastewater treatment. We have our one data point with GLSD. We want to see what else we can do with our digital twin, and then also really survey other digesters to see if others are sort of as forward thinking as GLSD in the way that they think about implementing digestion to offset their costs. And then integrate our process, our digital twin model, into the National Alliance for Water Innovation WaterTap and Proteus Lib tool. The Proteus Lib tool is the platform in IDEAS, which essentially allows us to have a simulation. Think about it as an Aspen for water, if people know what Aspen is, and basically a freeware tool that anybody can use to model water treatment, wastewater treatment systems, and hopefully biological treatment systems as well. Our hope is to help WaterTap to develop that interface. So that's just a very basic overview of the different features of our project. We're still very early on in this work. We're just finishing our first quarterly report now. And we hope to have our plan for installation of our sensor network into the GLSD digester in the next 12 to 15 months. And it will be a pretty exciting, be a pretty exciting project as we go along. I look forward to keeping NEBRA apprised of what we're doing. They're going to be part of our project, and I'm looking, hopefully we'll be able to come back and talk to you guys again later on in our project about our progress and some of our results. So feel free to contact me by email, check out our website. And I'm happy to just have a conversation with anybody on the call about anything I've said or about digestion in particular, or if you have any recommendations of things that we might want to look at. I'm all ears. Thank you.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, if you don't mind, just stop and sharing your screen and we can see everyone. All right. All right, so this is the time for questions and comments and thoughts.
So Jeff, the major cost centers that I can think of in a digestion dewatering system is the disposition of the biosolids, the polymer use, and then the energy. Is there going to be like, are you going to consider? I know you looked at the nutrient value of biosolids. I tend to see that as less value than the overall disposition strategy.
So Trung, you mean basically just the value is just getting rid of the biosolids, right?
Yeah, based on the contract, because it isn't typically paid per the nitrogen and phosphorus content as much as it is on a tonnage base. Then the hauling is also a pretty big piece of it, and that's why I asked whether you were going to consider doing both unit processes. Because digestion drastically impacts the dewaterability and the cost of conditioning of biosolids.
Yeah, this is a great question. Actually, we've heard something similar. We've heard something similar from GLSD, is that one of the greatest values of digestion is just reducing the volume of the biosolids.
Yep.
And then you have an on-site third party which can take those biosolids for a tipping fee and process them further, and that's what's done today at that site. So these are some of the numbers that we need to get so that we can identify, well, does it make sense to go down this path for, I mean, you could argue that we'll just take the biosolids right out of the plant and do something with them directly as opposed to digest them. And so we have that case study at the Greater New Haven Water Pollution Control Facility where they take biosolids from their wastewater plant and just burn them.
Yep.
They also have a side streaming process where they're doing a pilot scale demonstration of brown grease recovery for biodiesel production. So we have a few different things to look at and case studies to look at of alternatives to digestion. I know that there's other processes as well that we should be also looking at, like hydrothermal liquefaction or pyrolysis, that might also be alternatives to digestion, and that we should also consider as alternatives. But we need more information, and sometimes the financials aren't always as publicly available as you'd like to see, unless I'm not looking in the right places. But getting financial numbers from municipalities is generally a little easier because they're all public utilities and therefore usually release some kind of annual report about their costs, and all you have to do is dig through them to figure out like what the actual cost of the different operations are, if you can break them down in that way.
Right. Are you also going to look at the cogen system and a demand charge reduction during the time? I'm not sure if GLS has demand charge structures like we do in the West Coast, and balancing kind of, if you're doing based on a cost function, the timing of how you operate your system, how you feed your system, and because there could potentially be drastic savings through the cogen system if it's operated in a certain way.
I don't know if if New England does demand-based pricing in its grid or not. Sometimes I've heard about it, but I don't actually know if we do it. Does anyone on the call know if that actually happens? I've seen the duck curves in California, so I'm familiar with why that would exist and why they probably should run their their gas turbines at night. But this is a great question. I hadn't considered that feature. I'm looking at the electricity cost as sort of like a black box, and so those costs are whatever they are, and how, if there's surge pricing or not, I don't know what goes into that calculation. But it's a great question. I don't know. Ideally, you run the engines all the time at some base optimum load, as opposed to cycling them on and off when necessary. I guess you could also store gas on site and run more of them when the pricing is better. Oh, so it looks like Mike mentioned that there are demand charges for large facilities in New England.
And right, like you said, it's not really as feasible without some type of battery or storage. Because cycling on cogen is not a fantastic concept.
Yeah, I mean, if you have on-site compressors, maybe, or if you have, say, let's say you do biogas upgrading on site, then you already are going to have some compressors on site and higher pressure gases potentially. So you might be able to do that. And actually, one of the things we're also looking at is biogas upgrading options, and if there's a value proposition for that, especially as natural gas prices moderate a little bit, there might be some opportunity to do some pipeline grade upgrading. Ned, I see you have a question.
Yeah, I just wanted to say that what I'm aware of, and others on the call may know of additional examples of ways that currently facilities are trying to optimize and tweak their digester and biogas use in ways to optimize finances, essentially. One that I'm aware of is to maybe, I think it's in California, for facilities to switch from making just biogas energy through engines or something to electricity to switching to biomethane production. And with the RINs values, there's obviously really great value there. And there's one or two that I read of that are doing some optimization sort of on the fly, based on pricing. They'll keep their engines running all the time, as you said, using natural gas as a substitute for biogas, and then put the biogas, pull the biogas to another use at certain times of the day or for certain markets. So there's a little bit of playing with that, but there seems to be interest in that kind of optimization. Yeah, so just wanted to bring that up, and I thought maybe others would have additional ideas on existing efforts to kind of optimize AD.
Yeah, I think we have at least one or two operators on the line, or we did. Certainly Sherry, and I think Lewiston Auburn was on the line. Is that something we can get from our members? That would be helpful.
Janine, I can add one item. This is Sherry. So a new environmental credit is available now, the Clean Peak energy credit, or energy certificate, I believe they're called. And they're based on power production during certain times when there's really high demand in the winter or the summer. And they have, blocks of time. So facilities can hone in on those times and make sure that, whether it's maybe building up your supply of biogas a little bit, making sure you can run your engines like at 100% during those times. The credits are worth a lot more money during those periods of time, like I said. So just a really good revenue source for cogen facilities.
Yeah, especially if you can optimize operations.
Absolutely. So that goes to Trung's point about pricing variability. which is great to hear that those credits exist. And those credits need to be incorporated into our optimization calculation. And we need to know, and some of them are state-based, some of them are federal. And if there are, and also we want to be able to predict what would happen if there was a carbon price instituted.
Oh, boy.
And if there's a carbon price instituted through cap and trade, that can be another major incentive structure for doing this kind of thing.
Absolutely.
And how would one thing I'm interested in particular is the sensitivity of those credits. So like if carbon is priced at $50 a ton versus $100 a ton, or whatever it ultimately is, how would that create different incentives to, pull the trigger on building a digester system at a wastewater plant versus not? And so you obviously have to amortize the price of the plant. There's those kinds of calculations that engineers are somewhat familiar with, that we can run to make sure that it makes sense. Like, how much do you have to make the investment make sense? What's the ROI?
Two other thoughts. So you're looking at carbon emissions. Are you looking at fugitive emissions? Whether do you have like a sensor for specific gravity for the exit point of the digester? Because I guess if your specific gravity is lower, then you have methane entrained, and it gets emitted in the dewatering system.
I hadn't thought about that. Sherry, is methane concentration in the water measured?
That's a great question. I believe that would be no.
This is a bit.
Brett's on the line too. Yeah, I think it's no. We do measure it, obviously leaving the digesters before gas treatment, after gas treatment, but nothing entrained, no.
There's a big John Willis from Brown Caldwell thing. He always talks about fugitive emissions. It's one of the things that will increase depending on your conditions of your digesters and the characteristics. But the other thing is, as you're going back to some of the demand charges and treatment, I'm trying to think like how to build a digital twin across the entire plant. And each unit process has a bit of a different optimization requirement. So the liquid treatment is centered around something different than the solids treatment. And so as you're optimizing your AD and your dewatering, you're also cycling more nitrogen back as you try to improve your VSR and then your dewatability. And then going back to kind of Sherry's comment on that incentive program, then you're increasing your aeration and treatment requirement in the liquid treatment. So as you piece together these machine learning models and across different unit processes, it becomes incredibly complex to optimize system-wide. And it's something I've been struggling thinking of how to approach.
Yeah, and if you add co-digestion to the mix, that's going to increase your nutrient load back to the plant as well. So it's a good point. That's is a big challenge.
That's a great point.
But
I've taken both of these notes. We should, I'm gonna think about this. And
no, it's really complex.
It's very complicated, or everyone would be doing it, Jeff. We want to help you get this done.
Let me mention that in terms of the entrained methane and the John Willis, concern about that, there is some research out, for example, at a recent paper looked at, took actual measurements of fugitive methane around a variety of different facilities in the UK, and wastewater treatment plants came out averaging 7.5% of their produced methane was fugitive, which is a pretty huge amount. And they didn't pinpoint or discuss much the details on that, where it came from, but the entrained methane in wastewater is one of the things they identify, or digestate, the entrained methane coming out of digestate. So, but other studies like in California have looked at it and seen only 1% to 2% perhaps. And anyway, there's a lot of interest. And as we're developing the B model, the greenhouse gas emissions model for biosolids management, we're wrestling with those details now and trying to figure out what the proper default values might be for that modeling.
Two excellent points. Trying to circle back with my process modelers on this specific question regarding optimization beyond just the digester itself. My immediate thought is that you work with just the digester itself and then do separate models for the other processes and then try to combine them later. Dewatering steps may be already integrated into the existing tools for water tap because they work with a wastewater treatment system model. My guess is that then they use a dewatering step for biosolids. So I don't know if it's the same one, but it's a great question to include. I'll definitely bring it up with our next meeting with them as well.
Great.
I would like to encourage everyone on the call to look into the National Alliance for Water Innovation. I'll put the link to their website in the chat because we run a semi-annual meeting which includes what we call an unconference. People can set up their own conference sessions, and then people can go and visit and talk about things that are of interest to them specifically. And I'd also encourage everyone to go see the roadmaps that were published by NAWI, particularly on municipal roadmaps. And there's some interesting information in those that may be of interest. We had academics, industry, municipalities all contributing to these roadmaps to provide their feedback on where the pain points are, where the research needs are, and identify some of the gaps that currently exist.
Great, thanks, Jeff. Oh, great. And Jeff put that NAWI hub right there in the chat for everyone. And I'll save the chat and follow up with folks on that. Any other questions or discussions?
Yeah. Can you hear me okay? This is Mike McDonald from National Grid.
Yes, we can hear you, Mike.
Oh, good. I couldn't chime in on the video, so I had to call in. So I missed the last 5 minutes. I'm not sure if you covered any more of the energy aspect or not. But I did just want to comment that if you're what's called a G3 facility in New England, there are retail demand charges. If you contract out your energy, there are also an ISO New England charges that are applied to the wholesale rate. And also there's something called the ICAP tag. So 1 hour of the year, the 1 hour of the year when you produce your most energy will dictate your energy supply cost for the next year. So that combined with renewable portfolio standards, the Clean Peak standards, which Sherry mentioned, and a few other things, there are some fairly significant benefits to this technology. So I just wanted to put that out there.
Mike, have you seen, are there, I'm assuming there are other digesters also selling power back to the grid then too. Is there any kind of data that you might share with us or that you know where we might find information about that?
Well, I would love to, there just doesn't seem to be, there aren't that many digesters in New England.
Yeah, no, he's right. There's one in Maine I'm aware of.
There are a couple down in, Rhode Island. There are a few in the area, but there just aren't many. I think it was a technology that sort of had its day and came and went, and now there's new interest in it for exactly this reason, because of the energy aspect. So, we at National Grid, we are trying to encourage the technology, but of course, the barrier is cost, operability. It's a whole new process to add to your system. So it's a pretty heavy lift to install just for the, just quote, for the reason of energy. But with tipping fees, that may change. With incentives, that may change. One of my questions actually was whether or not you know of I'll call it a plug and play technology. You had mentioned, what's the name of the company? Quantum Biopower. I'm wondering if do they have a skid mounted operation, or how do they operate? just thinking something to make it easier for these, medium-sized facilities to maybe have a owner-operator come in and help a facility that, just doesn't want to deal with biogas and energy generation and everything that goes along with that.
Yeah, my understanding of Quantum Biopower's operation is that it's a pretty standard digester. I think what's unique about what they do is they take food waste in its raw form and can chop it up and chew it up on site. And it's not pre-processed in any way. So I'm sure they can demand a little higher tipping fee for that. But I think that the digester itself is a pretty standard digester if such a thing actually exists. I think, a skid-mounted digester sounds difficult because the residence time to be so high, unless the capacity is extremely small. But I like the idea of a modular system that can be sort of pieced together with low-cost materials. But I'd have to know more about the cost structure of digester installation to be able to comment further. Like, is it the materials or is it the permitting and labor to build the thing? I don't know those answers, because how expensive is a big tank? I don't know. It has to be a big tank that holds gas, and it has to be safe so that it doesn't turn into a bomb. But other than that, there's pumps and there's pipes and there's infrastructure. You have to get the solids to where it needs to go. So there's little features like that. I don't know where the cost breakdown is, or if there have been case studies on that. Has anyone on the call ever seen a case study on installation costs for a digester? Or Ned, do you know of anything?
Not off the top of my head, but I suspect we could track some down.
Yeah,
there's a lot of farm digesters that are operating that I would think are more small scale.
right. Our grind to energy is one example out of what is that? The incinerator group.
All right.
This grind to energy type, which is kind of modular and available, and is being installed at grocery stores, for example, who run relatively small amounts of food waste. So, there are some that have tried to, and there are a number of companies. It's an aggressive marketplace right now for setting up digesters of all scales. When it comes to tankage, the concrete costs are huge, and that's what the biggest thing is when building that kind of tank. But a company out of Quebec, for example, brought in technology from Europe that basically unrolls a big sheet of steel and fabricates a digester tank or a large, water holding tank, much less expensively, and they've had some success north of the border. So there are there's a lot of innovation going on, a lot of different cost models.
I just want to bring it up again because I mentioned it before, Jeff, and Mike at National Grid. There's some abandoned digesters out there, I know, and the plants that were built in the 60s were all built with digesters, and it'd be interesting to know what that potential is out there for a market. If we could, certainly the capital cost would be a lot lower if they could just rehab existing digesters.
Yeah, yes, yeah, you're absolutely right, and I can think of one.
Warwick, Rhode Island.
Yep. I don't know specifically about that one. I was talking with another one in the region here where they've got old digesters. They're thinking of tearing them down. So it just kind of gives you a sense of where the digester technology ranks, if you will.
Right.
For the most part, I don't think they're
until after Jeff gets done with it.
Until after Jeff, and yeah, we'd love to see that. So I'm very encouraged by the talk.
Thank you.
So we do both public and private digestion systems, and this has come up before. I mostly work on the public side. A lot of the costs associated with the code requirements for the digestion systems at municipalities, where they're significantly more robust. I think, like Ned, you were talking about, was it the lip digester? Is that the one? Chris Muller's been looking at all types of digestion systems. I think he's part of your guys' group, but he knows, yeah, he knows very detailed on why there's such differentials in cost.
I just wonder what the price point for energy would be to tip the scales. Like
Right.
if the cost of natural gas were to triple, or the cost
Or a
of electricity
carbon
were to
credit
double,
gets instituted.
that could make all the difference
Absolutely.
in the economics. So those are some of the
So
questions.
also
Go ahead.
Yeah, the energy landscape in general is changing fairly dramatically right now too, as we move away from lighting and some of the more standard efficiency measures.
Yep.
At the same time, there's a lot of pressure to meet greenhouse gas reduction goals. But the landscape for what's available out there based on what we're used to doing is getting smaller and smaller. So new technologies like this become more and more interesting, particularly if it is, you know, potentially a clean gas that you can put into the pipeline. So, you know, the past is not prologue, neither is present. You know, renewable portfolio standards are continuing to ramp up 3% per year. Municipalities are going to be feeling that. So even if it doesn't look attractive now, you know, 10 years, it probably will be. And that's about how long it takes to get through the CIP process and get something installed.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not an instant gratification profession. Things take a long time, but this is well worth it. I mean, the potential to turn treatment facilities into, you know, net zero facilities, or even energy generating facilities is there.
To that point, in the West Coast, there's kind of a conflicting trend. Some of the local regions are trying to ban natural gas to new facilities, new development, and there's fees actually in Seattle. There's fees to get natural gas to your home. In the Whatcom County area, they decided to try to ban all new natural gas pipes. At the same time, the state level, both Washington and Oregon now require a certain percent of RNG that gas utilities have to provide to customers. And so there's kind of this contrarian type of trends between the two different entities there. But it is driving RNG. The environment in Washington for RNG is drastically shifted with a new carbon credit system coming in Washington, as well as a LCFS program coming in Washington. Oh, as well as a food waste diversion program. So a lot of things are lining up in Washington for a really robust RNG program that we're seeing over here.
All right. Hopefully that comes eastward.
Jeff, that discussion reminded me of one of the you know, sort of key elements of the research was trying to avoid upsets, right? And tweak, you know, maintain a more stable AD environment, which seems to me a good core. You know, certainly as we've been discussing here, my brain's exploding because it's so hard to imagine bringing in all these different metrics and probably not worth, you know, you have to set a lot of priorities, I think, in the project to and exclude a lot of externalities, unfortunately, because you just can't wrap everything around them. And as you said, it can be built in later. Then, you know, start with a central unit, and then you can add in additional modeling. But in terms of digester upsets, do you have a sense of the factors involved? You know, I think of the work that Matt Higgins, Matt Higgins at Bucknell University did a few years ago on digester instabilities and rapid rise, foaming events and such. And then I think of when Trung was mentioning Washington State, that there was a period of time when King County, which is the leading, you know, wastewater agency in the country on so many things in terms of biosolids utilization in particular, but also anaerobic digestion and a very progressive and leading organization, they had some digester upset issues several years ago that had their digester shut down for more than a year. And it was really difficult for them to come back. And I'm not sure exactly what the details were, but I wonder if, sort of getting a handle on some of those kinds of things to help with that angle of the optimization is, would be helpful, or maybe you have a good sense of that.
Is there a way to quantify downtime outside of anecdotes? Like, anecdotes are really useful, but is there statistical data of digesters across the country that have these sort of catastrophic failures, and can we quantify an impact of those failures on energy production or ROIs for those digesters?
That's a really good idea. I would guess that a few case study examples that a few agencies who've been through it have probably done some of those calculations. So you could probably get 2 or 3 or 4 examples and sort of average them. I would guess King County had figured out, the lost revenues that they had from not having the electricity production, et cetera. Additional solids management costs, certainly additional solids management costs, because they had more solids to
Sure.
haul, that kind of thing.
All
Something
right.
else? Oh, sorry. Are we over time, Janine?
We are, but that's all right. I know folks have to go. I didn't know if there was any more discussion or questions, but
One
this is
question
really awesome work.
I might pose one final question for the folks, especially for operators out there. Something that we discussed in the National Alliance for Water Innovation is the importance of automation in the future of water treatment systems. And we're trying to understand how important that is. Like, can computers run these systems autonomously? And is that something that the municipalities want? Because finding operators that have the bank of knowledge, the heuristics for operating complex biological systems is challenging, and many operators are retiring or have had 30 years experience, and you can't replace that overnight. So thinking about that need, have there been wastewater treatment plants that have closed or shut down because they lack the experience necessary to use human-based heuristics to run systems? And how important or valuable would automation be? Maybe a parting question.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not aware of any shutdowns because they really can't, but a lot of times they'll be taken over by professional management companies when there's no knowledge there at the local level.
Right.
And it's a big issue. We have the same issue as everyone with worker. A lot of people retiring, having trouble bringing up young people. So to have some of these smaller facilities operate autonomously, I mean, right with the self-driving cars, be right along the same lines. It scares the heck out of me, but I think that there's definitely that would be a good thing to do, is automate those processes at small facilities.
And Janine, is it your experience that operators who get SCADA systems installed, have been getting those installed over the last 10 to 15 years, are generally pretty happy with being able to tap into an alarm at home from their
Yes.
cell phone, things like that? So the automation that's been created already and through SCADA systems is already.
Yeah, they're comfortable with it. They're used to using it. They use it to control things from home sometimes, but limited. So yeah, I think just building on that, building a SCADA system for anaerobic digestion would be great. I think that would be really helpful. And I don't know if Brent left. Oh, he's still on. Because he's the heuristic model right now that you use it, and he knows how to operate that digester, but because he's been doing it for a long time and has learned a lot about it. And they are all unique, and that's the thing, Jeff. Even treatment plants, it takes 2-3 years for a superintendent to really understand that individual system as unique from the last one they worked at. So yeah, automation's awesome. That's going to really be a game changer.
Well, I appreciate the feedback. Janine, thank you so much for putting this together and giving me an opportunity to speak to your community. This has been really great.
Thanks for sharing your email. I suspect you'll hear from a few folks offline.
Sounds great.
All right. Thanks again, everyone, for joining us. Oh, next month, and thanks, Professor McCutcheon. That was awesome. Thanks for sharing your research with us. We hope to see you all next quarter. We have EPA folks from Washington talking to us about a new anaerobic digestion screening tool and some biogas toolkits they've developed. That'll be April 8th at noon. So we'll look forward to seeing everyone the next time, and hope you had your lunch and digested.